Hey everyone, Jonathan here with Short Term Dojo. And in today's video, I'm going to be breaking down the case study of a master lease or rental arbitrage path to run a short-term rental. Now, in this case, I'm going to be talking about some of the capital requirements to get involved. That's going to be the most important difference here on what you're needing to have in the bank to get going and to furnish and get this place ready. I'll talk about your standardized expenses and using a standardized monthly revenue projection as well. I'm going to be focusing on some of the pros and cons of this particular method. It is not a holistic list, but they are things that I think are good to focus on with this particular path. So I hope this helps educate if this path is right for you. I do want to caveat this particular path that this is my least favorite, but depending on the financial scenario that you're in or your growth plan for this business, this may be a good option for you. So I hope you enjoy watching. I hope it educates you on the questions you may have on this path. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. And in today's video, we're going to be diving a little bit deeper into one of the three main ways that I highlighted in a prior video that you can run a short-term rental. Okay, and so what I'm going to try to do here is break down using some financials what it would look like from a profit perspective. Then we're going to move on to what it takes from a capital investment standpoint to acquire the asset and run the asset and get it ready to take to Airbnb or VRBO. And then we're going to move to some of the pros and cons, and I'll give you my take on what I like and what I don't like about this particular method. Okay. And what we're going to start with here, and some of these numbers are going to stay static across the board for the different videos that I create in the deep dives for the co-host, the master lease, and the ownership perspective. Okay, but we're going to start here. We're going to assume that we're going to make $4,500. Okay, with a short-term rental space, it's typically counted upon to make 2 to 4 in a great situation times what a long-term rental can make with the same type of unit. Okay, so what I'm saying here is, let's assume we're making $4,500 if we're renting this out on Airbnb as a short-term rental. Okay, we're going to use that number across the board. But let's take a look at a little bit of the financials in this particular case. All right, so again, just to recap very briefly, a master lease or rental arbitrage is where you are a tenant finding a unit that you want to turn into a short-term rental. You are signing a lease agreement that with a landlord that owns the property, and then you're going to turn around and you're going to rent that. Okay. So utilizing the financials in this case with a $4,500 a month revenue projection, we're going to walk through some of the operating expenses, right? So you have a lease. Again, these numbers are arbitrary, but I'm going to keep them relatively typical. Let's say you're signing that lease for $1,500. That's a pretty understandable number that you're going to face. You have utilities. This could be inclusive of the gas, the power, the water, maybe a TV subscription to Sling or Hulu or something like that. Your internet, right? You're going to have supplies. Now, this number could vary quite a bit, but we're going to plug in $75 here, just because you're going to have towels. Maybe you want to provide coffee. You're going to have sugar, different things that you could provide, but it's going to be a recurring basis. This number could fluctuate to be very low. If you don't want to provide a ton, you're going to have to provide something. Or if you want to go and do gift baskets and get really creative, you're going to charge more for that if you think the experience warrants it. You're going to have potentially a higher bill, but we're going to go with 75 here today. Insurance. This is something you're going to need. I'm not going to go into detail about the types of insurance, but I will say this. You will want to look at a short-term rental insurance policy. It does cover you substantially differently than a renter's policy in this case, or even a landlord dwelling policy that maybe your owner has, but you're going to want to cover each other and make sure at the very least that you're covered for anything that goes on. But I do want to highlight here that you're going to have a short-term rental insurance policy that is different than something you may be used to if you're new to this. But again, it's a little bit more expensive, but we're going to put $75 there. And then I'm going to highlight something called the tech stack. And what that means is that's just the software that you might sign up for to help manage these a little bit easier. This is probably the first optional item on this list, because if you only have one listing, you don't necessarily need to have this line item. But what you're going to find is for different softwares that you sign up for or services to help you better manage this, whether it's communication, whether it's keeping a calendar up to date, some things to manage reporting or counting, you're going to want to look into this at some point. So for argument's sake, we're gonna say that that's $50. Okay, so we're gonna take that $4,500 rental projection stacked against a $2,000 cost to run this. All right, so just think monthly right now. We're not talking about the investment upfront. We'll talk about that in a second. But you're basically netting $2,500. Okay, so that is what I really like about this. So once you get this thing leased, something that you're paying someone else really $1,500. Your cost is an extra $500 in this case, right? So you're going to make $2,500 in profit based on somebody else's asset, right? So that's a big benefit there, is that they own it, they have the risk and ownership, they're taking all the financial burden to acquire the asset. You're saying, hey, I'll pay you $1,500 plus my $500 in operating costs, and you're making $2,500 in your pocket. That is pretty fantastic, quite frankly. And compared to a long-term rental, I mean, you'd be lucky in a lot of cases to make $500 a month. I know that the scenarios can vary quite a bit, but this is a pretty substantial amount of money for what I feel is a marginal investment of time and money. But let's talk about, here's where this thing gets different, right? We're talking about the initial investment. You're going to have your security deposit, which whatever the rent would be, in this case, $1,500. Again, think of it as that money is now accounted for. So I know you're going to get that back, but it's now accounted for. So keep that in mind. Furnishings, decor, setup, electronics, smart locks, all these different things. I'm being pretty conservative here, $10,000 to $15,000. I'll make 2 points. One, if you're an excellent bargain shopper, and depending on how small the home is, if it's a studio or whatnot, you probably could get away with maybe less. But I want to forewarn you, don't go cheap. Not cheap in acquiring the asset, but cheap in quality. It's not worth it if you just spend less money to save money with something that's junk or garbage, or I don't mind secondhand, but it's got to be in good shape and it's got to be durable. I highly recommend that. So $10,000 to $15,000, again, that could vary widely. If you have a 6-bedroom cabin or something, that's not gonna be that much. It's gonna be way more than that. But for argument's sake, $10,000 to $15,000 upfront. Photos, I'm gonna throw this in here, $250. Again, that could vary widely. If you want to get a drone footage, you want to get a 3D Matterport, right? Just to have a really cool virtual walkthrough. I think that we could add that on there, which would increase the pricing. But I want to highlight photos because people cheap out all the time, use their own smartphone. They don't know what they're doing. Yes, the cameras are pretty good, but they don't know how to do lighting. They don't know how to get the right shot. They don't even take it during the right time of day. They'll take it in the dead of night. It makes no sense. But this should absolutely be a priority. That investment among anything else will have the best return on your money is high quality professional photos. Strongly encourage that. All right. So this is going to be where your return is eaten up front, right? So let's say you spent $15,000, you got another $1,500 there. You paid $250 for photos. Every $2,500 a month, there's going to be time associated with that before you recoup their money. So I just want you to think about that, because essentially that break-even point is going to eventually be where you start putting money into your pocket that's now house money, okay? So let's talk about the pros and cons here. So this is where I'm going to get a little bit philosophical. Where I see this benefit is you have a good amount of profit, okay? You're going to see this is very strong. You're not going to necessarily see that much in co-host. I mean, you just won't. Unless all things considered, all the same kind of unit, right? Because it's going to be a percentage. So what I love about this is that you get the true spread between what you're leasing the same asset for instead of actually purchasing it and acquiring it. You're getting quite a handsome spread here, okay? Less risk. And so I'm using the word less risk because you still have risk. You're going to have less risk with the landlord deciding maybe not to re-up the lease agreement. Maybe they're going to cancel the lease. They're going to raise prices significantly once they find out how much money you're making. There are several items that you are going to come across that produce some risk, but think about it. You don't own the asset. If you have to walk away, you didn't just purchase this asset to now have nothing to do with it, right? And when I say nothing to do with it is another one of these risks is local municipalities, HOAs, maybe they're cracking down on this in some cases, and you have to be very aware of the laws, rules, and regulations of what your local communities are allowing you to do. So if all of a sudden you could do Airbnb, now you're not, what are you going to do with this asset, especially now that you're obligated to the lease? So there absolutely is risk, but if you had to absolutely exit this property, you're not stuck flat out owning the asset with nothing that you can do with it other than maybe turning it into a long-term rental or selling it. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Scaling. Now, again, this is not the best idea to scale or best path to scale, but it's certainly better than purchasing something. So I put this in the pro column because as much money as you have to furnish these things, and you have a little bit of money coming up to sign new leases and security deposits, you could scale quite a bit. Let's say your same $100,000, keep this in mind, your same $100,000 would go a lot further signing lease agreements, furnishing them, getting online, and then collecting this kind of cash flow. Okay, so keep that in mind. So scaling is up there. Expense coverage, I'm going to talk briefly about this. Expense coverage is, there's a buffer here where you sign an agreement, a lease agreement, as if you're pretending to be a tenant in this case. And in this agreement, as most lease agreements, they cover the big items like your HVAC, your roofing, your plumbing, some major appliance issue, where you don't have to cover that. So that is a buffer of monetary value that you don't have to cover, and those things will happen. So I want you to know that's another benefit here, where if big ticket items go bad, you're not on the hook for them financially. Business taxes. I'm not going to go into specific deductions and taxes. That's a CPA's job. But in creating and going down this path and creating a business, there are several business-related expenses that now you've created a company that you can run expenses through and create tax deductions for yourself. So that's going to be a pro. Let's talk about the cons here. I'm a big believer in having full control. I myself, we have done all of our investments in the ownership avenue because I like there's a ton of things you can do with owning a piece of property. But I also like full control. I absolutely love having no middleman involved. You're never going to get out of full control if, let's say, a city tries to shut you down or an HOA, but you have more control in influencing those two bodies. And it's just another middleman out of the way, another third party you don't have to talk about things with. If you wanted to improve the home, you're not going to be able to do that unless you get a lease agreement. Maybe you could put in a fire pit or something that would be great, but your landlord doesn't want that liability. So again, full control over all decisions on the particular property. Return on investment. It actually is a good return on investment, but I want you to think about this for a second. You still have to come to the table with $10,000, $15,000, let's say in this case, and that money will be spent until you can recoup it. So the co-host method, which I'll go into detail in the other video that's assigned to that, the return on investment takes a little while to get that back versus, let's say, the co-host. So return on investment is actually good in the long run, but short-term return on investment, you have to put some money down to acquire this asset, get it ready to run, and move forward with it. And then it's expensive. You'll see in my other video with the ownership route, I'll talk about being very expensive because there's a huge cost of entry there. This is a moderate cost of entry. So you're still going to have money here. And that's kind of the cost of doing business with this route, but it's something to consider that it's going to be a little bit costly. So this is my least favorite option out of the three, just because I think you could scale a little bit quickly if you don't have money and you want to build your unit count and your portfolio count. It's probably better off to go in the co-host route. And if you have money and you want to acquire assets for long-term investments, depending on how the market plays out, depending on how this industry plays out, I would prefer the ownership route. However, again, with the cash flow that you can get for the minimal amount of upfront investment, this option really, really is an excellent choice. So I hope this is a good high-level overview of a master lease, the benefits, the cons, what you would expect from a typical scenario financially. And hopefully this can help you make the decision if this route is right for you. If you have any questions at all, please drop them down below. I'll do my best to answer them, or reach out to my colleagues who really specialize in master leases and help get an answer for you. Hope you have a great day. Again, Jonathan Basilio, founder and creator of Short Term Dojo. Thank you so much.